Thank you so much for this. I never expected you to get such a big cake for me. It feels like a dream. It was my 77th birthday, and my son's family had brought a large, beautiful cake to celebrate. I hadn't seen a cake this big in ages. The sight of it filled me with a sweet nostalgia. I picked it out. "Grandma, doesn't it look delicious?" said Matthew, my grandchild, with a proud grin on his face. I patted his head, and his eyes lit up with happiness, his excitement beaming through. It's been quite some time since my husband, Kent, passed away. He was my second husband, and Jason, his son, has now grown to be 46. Even though we aren't related by blood, I am deeply grateful that they bring Matthew to visit me. With a smile on his face, Jason handed me a small gift bag, saying it was a present. As I took the small bag, Matthew eagerly chimed in, "It's a present, Grandma." I picked it out. Matthew, who was soon to be in middle school, pounded the table with a youthful grin that seemed younger than his age. I smiled at his excitement and began to open the gift. The moment I peeked inside the bag, I was stunned. Inside was a photo taken of Jason's family and me, from a Christmas when the four of us gathered together. It was beautifully framed, with Matthew's innocent smile at the center. I couldn't help but let tears fall. The gift was a sign of how much they cared for me, and my heart warmed. We may not be connected by blood, but we are still family, my precious family. The bag seemed to contain more than just the photo. As I reached in to pull out another item, my hand froze. Matthew, unaware of my reaction, hugged me from behind, his face still glowing with joy. "Grandma, are you happy? Do you like the present?" The happiness I felt just moments ago seemed to vanish instantly. Matthew kept asking in his bright voice, "Do you like it, Grandma? Are you happy?" It felt as if my emotions had flipped completely. I made up my mind right then and there I'll throw it away. It was in that moment I decided, from this day forward, I would abandon a family Kent loved so dearly. My name is Ashley. In my late 20s, I went through a divorce. I took over my family business, a well-known custom tailoring shop, where my ex-husband was once expected to be the successor. The custom tailoring business, however, was far different than he had anticipated. The job required listening closely to clients' needs and proposing the perfect style for them. It involved extensive knowledge of fabrics and the dignity required to handle them. It was only by mastering all these qualities that one could truly be considered the successor to a custom tailoring shop, and my parents never stopped instilling this in him. One day, out of nowhere, he said to me, "I want a divorce." I understood how hard he was trying and how difficult things were for him, so I couldn't bring myself to tell him to keep going. But deep down, I wanted to say, "You don't have to keep pushing yourself. Just please, don't leave me." I couldn't say it, though. The thought of who would inherit the custom tailoring business if either of us left kept circling in my mind. Since we didn't have any children, my parents didn't oppose our divorce. After my parents' health declined, I fully took over the family business. Throughout my 30s and 40s, I poured all my time into running the custom tailoring shop. In the end, the business became even more successful locally. The issue of succession was always at the back of my mind, but with several employees and so much to manage, my work was never done. When I was in my mid-50s, I met a man my age while taking my regular walks in the park. He always wore collared shirts and neatly pressed trousers. Even early in the morning, his hair was perfectly combed, and he spoke with a dignified tone. Perhaps I was already drawn to him from the very beginning. "Good morning. Beautiful weather today, isn't it?" His name was Kent. He had lost his wife to an illness long ago, which gave him a quiet melancholy. That melancholy, however, added to his charm, almost enhancing his grace. The park had a large lake, big enough to have boats shaped like ducks on it, with a walking path around its perimeter. The sunlight danced on the water's surface, making me squint. As we walked together, "Ashley, I noticed something about you." Maybe it's your posture, but you carry yourself with such elegance. Oh, that's such a kind thing to say. It might be because I run a custom tailoring shop. That explains it. He nodded, genuinely impressed. When I glanced at his face, he was no longer smiling. He seemed to be lost in a distant thought. Ridiculous as it might sound at my age, I've fallen for someone. I think that's wonderful. Love doesn't have an age limit, but if that person knew how I felt, I'm afraid it might ruin what we have now. I couldn't help but chuckle a little. Kent, slightly embarrassed, confessed that ever since his wife passed away, he rarely had a chance to talk to women. I looked at him more closely. If he wasn't popular with women before, it was probably because of the wedding ring he still wore on his finger. I thought about pointing it out to him, but I decided against it. Instead, I chose to embrace everything about him, his present self, and the memories of his past. Even I could tell that I was falling for him, so much so that I was almost blinded by my own feelings. 2 years after we met, we got married. There were some hesitations about marrying at our age, but we agreed to do it to make the most of our remaining years. Living in the same city as us were Kent's son, Jason, and his wife, Megan. I thought of Jason and Megan as my own children, and from time to time, we all gathered together for meals and family time. Though Jason was already an adult and married, I loved him like he was my own son. I truly believed those happy times would go on forever. But 8 years into our marriage, Kent passed away. That day, Kent and I were on a trip, staying at a hotel with a view of the sea. We were basking in the calm waves and a breathtaking sunset, savoring the moment of bliss. But that night, Kent suddenly fell ill. He was rushed to the hospital, and they did everything they could, but his condition only worsened. A few days later, he quietly left this world. There were no last words, and I had time to prepare myself. I was left all alone. After the funeral, I decided to live a quiet life for a while. But it didn't take long for Jason and his wife's attitude toward me to change drastically. They started coming over more frequently than they ever had when Kent was alive. Jason's eyes seemed to scan the various decorations and surroundings of the house with interest. Our home, built on wealth accumulated from the custom tailoring business, was a grand estate set on an expansive plot of land, almost like a piece of art. Even now, the garden was maintained by a professional gardener, and the spacious house was regularly cleaned by hired staff. Wow, this garden is as amazing as ever. Seriously, it's so beautiful every time we see it. The garden was always vibrant with the colors of seasonal trees and flowers, almost as if nature itself had come together to create a breathtaking view. Almost as if nature itself had come together to create a breathtaking view. Walking inside the house, one would immediately notice the high ceilings and sturdy pillars. The spacious living room, with its magnificent fireplace, was adorned with luxurious sofas. Each room is furnished with wooden furniture, beautiful paintings, and handcrafted items, pieces whose origins I don't know much about. All of them were passed down from our ancestors. The house had been so meticulously maintained, largely thanks to Kent's precision and care. It might sound boastful coming from its owner, but this place was undeniably a mansion. For one person, it was far too big. Yet, the house was quite old, and signs of deterioration were apparent. I had a feeling that the time would come soon when simple renovations wouldn't be enough to keep up with its aging structure. Jason and Megan were seated comfortably on the living room's luxurious sofas. "I have a favor to ask." Jason started hesitantly. "What is it? You're so formal." Jason sat there, fumbling for words, and it almost felt like he was acting. But I pretended not to notice and waited for him to continue. "Now that Dad has passed, I'm wondering what our relationship is supposed to be. I mean, you're not really connected to me or Megan by blood. So, is it even okay for me to keep calling you Mom like before?" I lowered my gaze and gave a small smile. It's true that our relationship has become a bit ambiguous since Kent passed away. You were already an adult when we got married, so we didn't go through with any formal adoption. However, I think of you as my son, Jason, and of course, Megan as well. I truly hope we can keep our relationship as it has been all this time." Jason and Megan exchanged glances and smiled, clearly relieved. They must have been anxious. With Kent gone, the one who had bridged the gap between us, our relationship felt fragile and uncertain. I believed that as long as there were words to hold on to that familial bond, we could always remain like a true family. "I feel so relieved. I was worried you might suddenly cut ties with us," Jason said naturally. "By the way, do you think you could lend us some money?" Jason says it casually. When I ask him why, he explains that the company he was working for recently faced a downturn, and his bonus was reduced. Unhappy with the situation, he decided to quit his job until he found a new position. They were struggling to make ends meet, relying solely on Megan's part-time income. When Kent was alive, he never asked me for money. Kent probably kept him from doing so. While I knew in my heart that giving Jason money wasn't the right thing to do, I couldn't help but hand over a considerable sum from my wallet. Jason left, flicking through the bills with a grin on his face. I had never had the child I once wished for when I was young. That longing remained like a knot deep in my chest that never seemed to go away. If Jason leaned on me and treated me like a mother, then I wanted to think of him as my child. That's what I truly felt. But the requests for money from Jason and Megan became more frequent as time passed, to the point where I was practically supporting all of their living expenses. He would find a new job, only to quit soon after, and his periods of unemployment grew longer. Even without a steady income, he still asked for things, trips, cars, and always relied on me for money. I knew I should stop, but I kept giving them what they asked for. The thought of being left alone scared me too much. Eventually, Jason and Megan had a child, and Matthew was born. The day after Megan was discharged from the hospital, they brought baby Matthew to see me. Both of them gazed at the baby with pure joy. They said they had chosen the name Matthew together. When I complimented them on the name, saying how lovely it was, Megan smiled, and I felt a twinge of envy seeing that motherly expression on her face. I had reached this age without ever holding a child of my own. It felt so surreal. Growing up, I had always assumed everyone naturally became a mother, but I would never hold a child of my own to my chest. And as I watched Megan happily cradle Matthew, I felt a pang of envy and a slight ache in my heart. "Ashley, would you like to hold him?" "What?" I hesitated, taken aback, while Jason beamed beside her. He gently placed the still fragile Matthew in my arms, almost insistently. I could feel the soft warmth of the baby, the distinct scent of a newborn. It was so fragile yet beautiful. It felt almost frightening to touch. I loved Kent, and that's exactly why I couldn't let go of this family bond. The baby was sleeping peacefully, his expression serene. Hearing his faint breathing moved me deeply. "Oh, how precious he is." I found myself smiling unconsciously. Even if they were taking advantage of me for money, that was okay. There are many forms of family, after all. Thinking that the money I gave was supporting Matthew's life, I continued to hand Jason a set amount of money almost every month, just as he wanted. It was, undoubtedly, a foolish thing to do, but I didn't have the courage to stop. 12 years passed. I turned 77, and the work at the custom tailoring shop was becoming more and more physically demanding. Still, because there was no successor, I continued to work on site, meeting with longtime customers. As the president of the shop, many people still came by just to see me. Whenever such important customers visited, I introduced them to younger staff. In doing so, I hoped to bridge the way to the next generation. Then something unexpected happened. On the day of my 77th birthday, my son's family came to visit. That once little baby, Matthew, now had such a poised presence. When Matthew turned around, he beamed and ran up to me, greeting me politely. Jason and Megan followed, giving cheerful greetings and birthday wishes. They had brought a whole cake with the somewhat embarrassing message, "Happy birthday," written on it. "Mom, happy birthday, 77 years. Congratulations. We wish you many more years of good health." I was a bit surprised by Jason and Megan's celebration. In the past, they had rarely celebrated my birthday and often left soon after asking me for money. I had always thought that raising a child was probably hard work, that they likely didn't have time to come visit. It had been years since anyone had celebrated my birthday. The joy welled up, and I quickly wiped my eyes with my fingers to stop the tears from flowing. "Thank you so much. I never imagined you'd go to the trouble of getting such a big cake for me. We're glad you like it. Matthew picked it out at the bakery." "Really? Thank you, Matthew." When I patted Matthew's head, his face lit up with joy. Megan asked to borrow the kitchen to cut the cake, and headed there. In that moment, Jason's smile wavered into something more hidden and controlled. With that smile still on his face, he handed me a small gift bag. As I took the bag, Matthew, visibly excited, said, "It's a present, Grandma." I picked it out myself. Matthew, who would soon be in middle school, thumped the table with a youthful grin that seemed younger than his age. Smiling at how happy he seemed, I carefully opened the gift. The moment I peeked inside the bag, I was stunned. It was a photo, taken of Jason's family and me one Christmas when we were all together. The picture, beautifully framed, had Matthew's innocent smile at its center. Tears streamed down my face. The gift was a sign of how much they cherished me, and my heart felt warm. It's true that my relationship with Jason and Megan had been complicated. There were moments when their behavior suggested they might be targeting my assets, and I couldn't deny feeling a bit of suspicion and discomfort. But in the end, we are still family, my precious family. But the bag seemed to hold more than just the photo. I reached in and pulled out another gift, feeling its weight. I froze as I held it. Matthew, oblivious to my reaction, hugged me from behind, his face glowing with happiness. "Grandma, are you happy? Do you like the present?" "What the?" Jason's face twisted into a sly smile as he watched me, speechless. The happiness I'd felt just moments ago drained in an instant. Is this what it feels like when emotions flip so suddenly? I'll throw it away. It was at that moment that I made a clear decision. From this day forward, I would abandon the family that Kent had loved. The gift from Jason and Megan was a brochure for an assisted living facility. It was a high-end nursing home with 24-hour care and a view of the ocean. I was shocked by the brochure, but seeing the look on Matthew's pure face, I quietly came to terms with it. The clean, beautiful facility, with its view of the sea. Perhaps, in his own way, Matthew thought he had found me a new home. Maybe it was time. Perhaps they were genuinely worried about me, each in their own way. Yet Jason, with his bright and friendly smile, made another request. Since Matthew was almost in middle school, and I was getting older, he pleaded with me to hand over the house to him and Megan. "This house? Are you really planning to live in such an old, oversized house? It looks clean because I hire professionals to maintain it, but actually living here is a lot of work. We could just hire cleaners when we move in," Jason replied nonchalantly. "And where exactly would that money come from?" Jason, just like in the past, only ever called me Mom when asking for something, and now, he was sweet-talking me into giving up my assets. "I do plan to leave the house and my assets to you eventually, but it's not like I'm too frail to manage things myself right now. I'm just worried about you, Mom. If you lived in a facility with staff and caregivers, Megan and I would be more at ease. But, picture this, imagine yourself in a room with a view of the ocean, just relaxing. I'll handle the family business somehow, so there's nothing for you to worry about. Even though Jason isn't my biological son, he is still my son. But when it comes to running the custom tailoring shop, he hasn't gone through any kind of training or preparation, and frankly, I don't trust him with it. Our shop employs around 10 staff members, and for Jason to take on the role of president, he would need significant training. It's far too early for that. And to be honest, I never thought Jason even had any intention of taking over the business. Without fully grasping the responsibility of inheriting the custom tailoring shop, Jason and Megan seemed to want to take all of my assets and the position for themselves. The realization hit me like a wave of shock. His smile was so similar to the one I loved on Kent's face. But behind those gentle eyes, I felt like I was seeing a different person entirely, and I couldn't help but look away. Despite not being related by blood, I had given my all to love them as Kent's family. Yet here Jason was, spreading out the brochures in front of me, trying to convince me that this facility was the perfect place for me. Was he really just trying to get rid of me? The thought weighed me down even more. I started losing even the strength to argue. Yes, it's certainly a beautiful view. I picked up the brochure and forced a smile. Yes, I'd been thinking for a while about stepping down as president and retiring. The only difference was whether I made the decision myself or had someone else push me to it. Maybe this isn't such a bad ending. I can't allow myself to think that he is abandoning me. I'm the one letting go. If I could discard all the ties that bound me and spend my remaining years quietly in a room with a view of the ocean, wouldn't that be a blessing? I closed my eyes. If I look at it from a different perspective, I'm very fortunate. I've lived a life of luxury and comfort, and to close the final chapter of my life in such a lovely place feels like a gift. Matthew chose it for me after all, right? I'll consider it, I said with a smile, gazing at the brochure once more. Something caught my eye, and I felt a hint of suspicion. I'm glad you're happy, Mom. I'll study up on the custom tailoring business so you can retire with peace of mind. I lifted my head and looked at Jason. He was happily munching on the sweets I had prepared. Don't think too hard about it, Mom. Just leave everything to me. It'll be fine. His carefree smile and those words caused something inside me to snap. I took a deep breath. I tried to suppress the anger bubbling up and told myself to stay calm. All right, I said. Hearing that, Jason put down the sweets and clapped his hands. The sooner, the better. Let's get the contract signed, and I'll prepare your will and any other paperwork. Shall I handle all that? I declined, keeping my smile, and told him that I would take care of all the arrangements and to come back in a month. The 1-month period I suggested was enough time to reflect on my life and reevaluate myself. I quietly clenched my fist, ready to start preparing for the day I would see Jason and Megan again. A month, got it. Then in the meantime, I'll brush up on the custom tailoring business, learn about the different types of suits, fabrics. Maybe I'll even check out some YouTube tutorials. I couldn't tell whether Jason was joking or serious, so I smiled vaguely and let out a sigh. A month later, Jason and Megan returned to my home. That day, I decided to wear a suit. I stepped forward in front of the full-length mirror. The crisp white fabric naturally made me stand straighter, filling me with a sense of strength. This suit, made just for me, seemed to imbue me with a newfound confidence. It was a refined, elegant suit that gave off a composed impression. When I told my employees that I had an important matter to attend to, they had prepared it for me. Megan admired my suit and sincerely complimented how wonderful it looked, and I thanked her with a smile. Jason, as usual, sank into the sofa. He looked at my suit, appearing to be impressed, and started to stroke his chin with his fingers. It's rare to see you in a suit outside of the shop. What's the occasion? When you wear a suit, it makes you more aware of your posture and how you carry yourself, doesn't it? Wearing proper attire helps to guide things in the right direction. I see. But don't you think living like that all the time is kind of suffocating? Jason pulled at the sleeve of his tracksuit and laughed, saying that comfort always wins in the end. I didn't think there was anything wrong with wearing a tracksuit, but as someone who ran a custom tailoring shop, I wanted him to understand that wearing a suit provides a unique experience, something you can't find anywhere else. It naturally instills a sense of grace and elegance, and I wished Jason could come to appreciate that feeling. If I take over the custom tailoring shop, I'm thinking of expanding our sales online or something. I mean, just selling in a store is so outdated nowadays. Without saying anything, I walked over to the living room curtains and opened them. Outside the window, a group of gardeners was at work, carrying equipment and tending to the grounds. Is today the day for the garden to be pruned? No, it's not. Megan looked puzzled, as if wondering why the gardeners were there, but didn't ask any questions. Matthew wasn't around today, since it was a weekday afternoon. He was in school. So, have you decided when you're going to move in? I just can't help but worry that if you keep working all the time, you're going to hurt yourself one day, Jason said. Yes, you're right. The sooner, the better. I want to proceed with the arrangements so I can live comfortably, I replied. I could see the joy spreading across Jason and Megan's faces in response to my words. If I retired and handed over the mansion and business to them, they would become wealthy overnight. I could understand their eagerness all too well. Suppressing the anger simmering within me, I sat down and calmly began to explain the future steps, the specifics of moving into the facility, the moving company, and most importantly, the future of the custom tailoring shop. Our shop has been a family business for generations. You do understand that a custom tailoring shop can take many forms, right? Jason and Megan exchanged glances and, with awkward smiles, admitted they didn't know. I gave them a gentle smile and began to explain what it truly meant to inherit a custom tailoring business. The shop I run has always focused on being deeply rooted in the local community. However, I started to share that our clients aren't just locals, many come from far away as well. People from outside the local area come to your shop. Are you advertising on the internet or something? Jason asked. No, what we sell at my shop isn't just suits, I said. A custom tailoring shop is connected to people's life events, weddings, funerals, and ceremonies marking the growth of children. It's about becoming part of the family's history. In other words, inheriting a long-established family business means inheriting the customers, I explained. Well, yeah, of course. So that's why you need to send out promotional emails and postcards to get products sold. By the way, Jason, does your family take photos together? Surprised by the sudden question, Jason looked puzzled but quickly responded, yeah, we do. It seemed they did take family photos, but as I learned, they used rental suits from a photo studio where one of Megan's friends worked. In the photo, Matthew was dressed in a flashy suit, smiling proudly. Our custom tailoring shop has built much of its wealth over time, but times are changing, and the need for suits has lessened, I said. In the past, suits were an essential item for ceremonies in every household, but times have changed, and many families no longer feel that way. Even our longtime clients, who have been with us for generations, are starting to think differently. As each generation changes, so do their values and perspectives. And perhaps this shift signifies that the need for a custom tailoring shop, or its role in society, has come to an end. Many custom tailoring shops are reinventing themselves with new business models. So I ask you, Jason, what kind of future do you envision for a custom tailoring shop? It was a serious question for me. I wanted to know what Jason thought about the future direction of our family business. If he had given it serious thought, I could feel at peace stepping down. But Jason, who clearly couldn't comprehend my feelings, just laughed as he snacked on sweets at the table. Well, you won't know what it's like until you try being the boss. I've never been a president before, Jason said playfully. And that's how you think a business should be run? Mom, you didn't pass on the management rights until you were 77 because there was no successor, right? We're running out of time. It's clear that as your son, I'm the only option. So what you're saying is that I have no choice. Well, you did get divorced, right? I mean, unless you have some secret child with your first husband hidden somewhere, I don't think I have any competition, do I? Jason laughed mockingly, making fun of me. I closed my eyes quietly. I've decided I'm going to retire. I've dedicated so much time to this business, and now I'd like to live a quieter life, I said firmly. Exactly, that's the way to go, Jason exclaimed. I had been considering passing on the business to the next generation even before you brought it up, Jason. So, maybe this is the perfect timing. Jason leaned forward on the sofa, his face filled with anticipation as he stared at me. Outside the window, the gardeners, who had just brought in heavy machinery, were unrolling cords and getting ready to start work. But instead of pruning the garden, they were preparing to cut down the trees that held so many memories. At one point, I considered letting you both inherit the family business, but that's no longer possible. I've already found someone else, and they will be officially appointed as the president as planned, I said. Jason's expression was blank for a few moments, as if he couldn't comprehend the meaning of my words. Then, as the loud sound of tree cutting started in the garden, Jason raised his voice to match it. Wait a second. You can't do that. You told me that even though we're not related by blood, you think of me as your son. A promise. And what exactly was this promise? A promise is a promise. If you're not passing the business down to your son, then who are you giving it to? Does that mean all the family ties between you and me were fake? Family ties? How could he say such a thing? I slammed a brochure Jason had brought me last month onto the table. The beautiful ocean, the clear blue sky. The brochure described an attractive nursing home with a picturesque view of the coast from the windows. Right next to it, I slapped down another piece of paper. It was a contract for moving into a high-end assisted living facility. At first glance, it seemed like the contract went with the brochure, but I had noticed something that day. The address listed on the contract was different from the address of the facility shown in the brochure. After some research, I discovered that the address belonged to a very old building. It was an aged apartment complex with no showers and had stood for many years. The rent was unbelievably low, and apparently, all the units were currently vacant. If I had unknowingly signed this contract, were you planning to force me to live in this apartment? No, this must be some kind of mistake. I would never do something like that. Maybe it was Matthew. Yay, that's it must have been Matthew playing a prank. Jason frantically glanced at Megan, seeking her agreement, but Megan just kept staring out the window, seemingly stunned. The tree cutting in the garden was progressing rapidly, and it was no wonder she was shocked. Today, due to time constraints, I had many workers come over to cut down all the trees in the garden. They had asked me to leave the house during the work, as it could be dangerous. But I was born and raised here. I wanted to see this house's final moments. There's no doubt this contract came from you, even as a potential president. Do you think you can brush off a vital contract as someone's prank? But what kind of work is going on outside? Are you remodeling the garden? The trees in the garden continued to fall one by one. I had made up my mind to let go of this house. Despite being a mansion, its vast grounds made it nearly impossible to find a buyer as it was. So I decided to have the trees cut down, the building demolished, and then sell the land and its assets. In the distant memories of my mind, I thought of the days when those dear to me enjoyed this beautiful garden. Perhaps I might feel a sense of regret for not being able to pass this house down to the next generation, but as I spend the rest of my life, I want to feel unburdened. After inheriting and running the custom tailoring shop all these years, I wanted to reward myself by letting it all go. I've decided to let go of this house. Since the building is so old, the land will be cleared and sold through a real estate agent. The household items are set to be donated to the local museum. A donation. But if you sold those, they'd be worth a lot of money. The proceeds from selling the property will be donated to welfare organizations, and I will be stepping down as president. The vice president will take over from here. Jason stood up from the sofa, looking down at me. There was a hint of fear in his expression. Why would you do such a thing? Donations? Charity. You're just throwing away money, aren't you? Abandoning a family struggling for money to donate to a random cause. That contract was intended to deceive me. I feel ashamed that I considered someone who would trick me as family. No, that's not it. It really was Matthew. It was just a prank by him. Before Jason could finish his excuse, I grabbed the contract and threw it at him. The scattered papers fluttered to the floor, and the room fell silent. Do you seriously believe that a child like he could have obtained a rental contract just for a prank? How much do you intend to insult me? Jason fell silent, lowering his head in quiet resignation. Perhaps he'd lost the will to make any more excuses, as he just sat on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. However, I still care about Matthew. I just want him to be happy. Jason turned his gaze back to me, his eyes filled with a hint of expectation. I was starting to feel tired. I will pay for Matthew's upbringing until he reaches adulthood, so just let me know. I'll make sure he can attend high school and college if he chooses to. That was my greatest compromise. Although I said I was severing family ties, I couldn't help but worry about Matthew, whom I'd watched grow up over the years. If I suddenly stopped providing financial support after all this time, the one who would suffer the most from a lowered standard of living would be their child, Matthew. The thought of Matthew going hungry or not being able to have proper clothes to wear pained me. So I resolved to do at least the minimum I could for him. Wait a second. Is that it? Just child support? That's not enough to maintain the kind of life we've been living. That's normal. You need to work hard and make a living for yourselves. Please, Mom, wait. I'm begging you. Please reconsider. He pleaded desperately. Over and over, he shouted for me to reconsider. Megan, who had been standing frozen beside him, read the situation and dropped to her knees as well. But Megan stared at the floor, her eyes fixed on an uncertain point. I always felt there was something wrong with the way we were living. But since Jason never worked, and we needed money for living expenses, I just couldn't say anything. Megan, shut up and just beg her, Jason yelled. But she's offering to pay for Matthew's upbringing, isn't she? Isn't that enough? From now on, we can work hard ourselves. And how can you expect me to do something that troubles some? The money is there. Just take it. I don't understand why you'd throw it away. Jason shouted at Megan, his voice loud enough to compete with the noise from outside. Ever since Kent passed away, I had tried my best. I wanted to see Jason as a son. But in the end, we were strangers. I thought we had built a family bond over time, but it turned out I was the only one who believed that. And in the end, I was betrayed. We could never truly become a real family. I did want to live with you all, but I had to face reality. Why not? There's still time. We can still live together, Mom. I have no reason to be called Mom by you anymore. Outside, I could hear the sound of the gardeners felling the large trees. That sound never stopped. Leaving the two behind, I walked away from the scene. That was the last time I ever saw Jason and Megan. The house had grown quite old, and though it wasn't visible at first glance, a contractor had warned me that it might have been in danger of collapse. On the day the house was demolished with heavy machinery, I went to watch from a nearby spot. The roof was torn down, the outer walls crumbling. As soon as a hole began to form in the walls, it no longer felt like the home I had lived in for so many years. The site manager seemed to worry about me, perhaps because I was crying. Although it was my decision, I never thought demolishing the house I had lived in for so long would be this painful. But I felt no regret. I would never return to this place again. Afterward, I moved to the upscale nursing home with an ocean view, the one Matthew had chosen for me. I kept just enough money to live the rest of my life comfortably and freely, donating all the rest. I still meet Matthew in secret without Jason and Megan knowing. I've told him that if he ever needs help, he can rely on me. And if I'm no longer around, there's an appointed representative who can take care of anything he might need. I'm not sure if Matthew truly understands what representative means. but I intend to support him as much as I can so he can be as happy as possible. As for Jason and Megan, without financial support from me, their lifestyle took a drastic turn for the worse. Apparently, they had expected to inherit a massive fortune and had purchased luxury cars, only to struggle with the payments later. I suppose they could sell the cars, but once you've lived a life of luxury, it's hard to let go. In the end, they kept borrowing money to maintain their lifestyle until it became unmanageable, and they ultimately divorced. Now Megan lives with Matthew. Unlike Jason, Megan seemed to have a more grounded sense of finances, and little by little, she was restoring a more stable life. I suspect she knows that I meet with Matthew in secret, but she's never said anything about it. It feels, in some way, like her way of apologizing to me. Now I live in my home with an ocean view. Given how much I worked all my life, this bit of luxury feels deserved, or so I tell myself. What I look forward to the most now, it's going out for a meal with my dear grandson Matthew. Just the two of us, on my birthday this year. On my calendar, I've marked my birthday in red. Ah, this feels nice. Sitting by the window, where the refreshing sea breeze gently brushed my cheek, I closed my eyes and quietly drifted into sleep.
Do you realize what you've done, sis? It's only natural that everyone's giving you the cold shoulder after the two of you betrayed me. You knew the consequences, right? In response to my fury, my sister retorted with a derisive smirk. Consequences? People's opinions? If you worry about that stuff, you'll never survive. If we're happy, nothing else matters. If you keep concerning yourself with what others think, happiness will keep slipping away from you, just like this time. In the amid of our quarrel, my husband sided with my sister, grinning wickedly. However, having executed a ruthless revenge plan against those two, I will share that story today. My name is Ava, a 28-year-old employee. And my husband, whom I married last year, is 2 years older than me. He's 30. Let me share a bit about my background. My parents divorced when I was young. My sister and I were taken in by our mother, who raised us single-handedly. Despite the divorce, we still meet with our dad once a month. I'm not sure how my mother felt, but I loved my dad very much. My mother was tough and always assertive. Always positive, she was like a ray of sunshine for us. However, she passed away due to illness when I was a sophomore in high school. My sister is 3 years older. She was extremely cute from childhood, with distinct facial features like a child actress. Even when we walked together as kids, my sister would often get comments from strangers, like, "You look like a doll. Are you sisters? You don't look much alike." I was fed up hearing those insensitively blunt words that hurt me without them realizing it. Even as a kid, it hurt. Compared to my sister, I had a typical face like everybody else. Unlike my doll-like sister, I've never been called cute by a stranger. In our student days, my sister was always popular. Compared to her, I was treated like a nerd, unpopular girl. Despite that, I was proud of and loved my beautiful sister. I adored her, but there was one thing I didn't like. My sister always desired my belongings. She would casually take my clothes and things and take them to her room as if they were hers. But it didn't stop at material possessions. For some reason, she would exchange contact info with my friends, and if she just became friendly with them, it would have been fine. But she somehow managed to steal those friends away from me. In the end, she even took away all my old flames. I was slow to notice it, but once I did after the third boyfriend, I stopped introducing them to her. And I hid my relationship with my now husband until our marriage was decided. During our relationship, she would often say, "I know you have a boyfriend. You can't fool me. Introduce him to me. We're sisters, after all." But I told her, I've decided not to introduce my boyfriend to you anymore because you always take them from me. I'll introduce him to you when we've decided to get married." To this, she laughed off and said, "Oh? Are you insecure? The one who gets their boyfriend stolen is at fault, you know. You get them taken away because you don't work on yourself. You reap what you sow. Don't blame everything on me." This attitude reaffirmed my decision never to introduce any boyfriend to her again. Happiness came out of the blue after dating him for a year and a half. He proposed in a chic restaurant, something straight out of my dreams. Of course, I was delighted and decided to get married. Once we've decided to get married, it's time for the families to meet. I also couldn't avoid introducing him to my sister anymore. The day I introduced him to my sister and my father. As expected, my sister showed up in a dress as if she were attending a wedding. My father also seemed a bit tense. "Dad, sis. I've decided to get married to him." As I introduced my fiancé, my sister's eyes sparkled as expected. "Wow, he's so handsome. What does he do for a living?" Her usual flirty tone. "His family runs a food-related business. Being an only child, he is the promised successor." Upon learning that, my sister got even more excited. "What do you like about my sister?" "I'm good at cooking, and ever since our mom passed away, I've been the one doing most of the household chores. Ava, she's not good at cleaning. I always have to clean up after her." "Oops. Did I say too much? Sorry." This was also within expectations. Every time I introduce my boyfriend, she can't stop making comments that lower my rating. I don't particularly hate cleaning. But due to my busy job, I made it a habit to do a thorough cleaning every weekend. As I wondered how he would respond, he said, "I'm surprised that Ava's sister is beautiful this much. I thought you were an actress. You're good at housework, right? It might be nice to live together, the three of us," he said, playfully with a gleam in his eyes. Perhaps it made her feel good, but my sister also said, "Since we're going to be family, it might be better to exchange contact information. Here's my ID, please get in touch." And she handed him a handmade business card, despite her being a part-timer who doesn't even work properly. Pathetic. I felt my mood drop a bit at this point. I wanted to argue back. About housework is entirely different. My sister is extremely OCD. Since she has a lot of free time, she cleans obsessively, several times a day. Even though she doesn't have money, she insists on cooking without additives because of her big ego. The food she makes is mostly steamed vegetables under the title of Taste of Ingredients. Well, it might be good for the health, but whether it can be called cooking when it's just microwaving is questionable. Ever since I started working, I've been cooking my own meals. My father told my sister, who was eagerly getting involved, "Don't always take your sister's stuff, go find your own. It's unseemly to reach out for others' stuff. You're not that young anymore, get married while there's someone willing to take you," he said half-jokingly. My sister, her face red with anger, snapped, "I don't want to hear that from a divorced man. I feel sick. I'm leaving," and stormed out. My father said, "Don't worry about your sister. I'll take care of it. Please make her happy. I've put a lot of burden on my daughter. Please take good care of her." And he pleaded with him. He also said, "Leave it to me. I will make her happy. And please continue to support us." And time flowed happily as if the earlier incident had never happened. After that, I greeted his parents. "Nice to meet you. We've recently gotten engaged. We look forward to your guidance and support." "Thank you." As I said that, his mother, Emily, warmly greeted me. "Oh, don't be nervous. You're such a beautiful girl. It we suddenly have a new daughter." His father, Robert, also added, "We're a small business, but we're hoping you might consider working with us. We wouldn't want to force you, but would you think about it?" I had already heard about this from my fiancé. I'm currently doing office work, so it's my area of expertise. Yes, I have heard about it from him. I'll certainly try my best if there is something I can do. I'm looking forward to working with you both professionally and personally. Emily then said, "Oh, that's wonderful. It's a relief to have you here since we're just learning as we go with the office work. We're looking forward to working with you too." At that time, I was completely caught up in the dream of marriage. Considering that I didn't have a mother and was on bad terms with my sister, we decided not to have a wedding ceremony. Of course, we didn't have much money for the wedding. We registered our marriage at the government office, and we officially became husband and wife. I left my previous job to start working at my father-in-law's company. I thought I had a happy life ahead of me, but I began noticing something odd after I started living with my husband. He takes a day off from work very often. He's completely spoiled because his parents own the business. Even his parents, so used to this, don't say a word when he takes a day off. And then, one day when he slacked off from work, something happened. I had forgotten my phone at home and came back during lunch break to get it. But there were a pair of high heels at the entrance. More than a strange feeling, my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Moreover, those high heels were the same one my sister had taken from me before. I understood the situation instantly. I decided to go outside and act as if I hadn't seen anything. That night, he acted as if nothing had happened. I had absolutely no trust in him anymore. My sister, oblivious to the fact that she's just being played by her numerous boyfriends, keeps insisting that she's popular. Wanting to know more about my sister, I hired a private detective to investigate her. I was shocked by the investigation's results after a month. My sister had been involved with 7 different men in that month, besides my husband. Moreover, all of them were married. My sister had never held a full-time job. Whenever she did work, it was part-time, and she couldn't stick with it because she has a big ego. If she's scolded, she doesn't go to work anymore. When she was younger, she used to have a bunch of sugar daddies. She looked down on me, working and earning my own money, and said confidently, "If a woman is cute, she can get by in life." Perhaps she began to feel the limits of relying on sugar daddies as she got older. Still, my sister, unable to be independent, was hooked on easy dating apps in hopes of marrying into money. And she would catch rich men and get involved with them. However, all those men were already married. My sister was just their plaything. My sister, probably so blinded by her popularity, didn't realize the extent of her actions. In the end, she was involved in extramarital affairs with 8 men, including my husband. It was disgusting to even breathe the same air as such a husband. So, I brought up the topic of divorce. My husband retorted, "Huh? You want a divorce? Well, if that's what you want, fine. I'll give you a divorce. But remember, you're the one who started this, so no alimony." Just as I expected, he readily agreed. I confronted him. "You were having an affair with my sister, weren't you? I know everything. How can you cheat on your wife with her sister?" Upon hearing this, my husband responded, "Oh, that makes things easier. I'll divorce you and remarry your sister. Even her parents know. It'll be quicker to have her over and be a witness to our divorce papers." He then called for my sister. She arrived in a matter of minutes. Seeing my sister only fueled my anger. I asked her, "Do you realize what you've done? It's only natural for others to look at you coldly because you both betrayed me. Are you prepared for the consequences?" In response, my sister just belittled me. Consequences? Public opinions? If we cared about such things, we couldn't live. If we're happy, it doesn't matter what others think. If you keep worrying about how others see you, happiness will slip away, just like this time. I'll also cut ties with you. I've taken the position of the company president's wife. In a sense, I was relieved. The sister I loved so much in my childhood is no longer there. If I can cutting ties with her, I'll gladly do it. The divorce was finalized without a hitch. I told them, "I don't want alimony. In return, never see me again." My ex-husband responded with a grin. "Well, that's a relief. A peaceful divorce." We were renting our residence, so there was no property to divide, and we didn't even have much savings. The small amount of savings we had, which was just enough to cover moving expenses, ended up going to me. Then, his in-laws, Robert and Emily, stepped in. In fact, I had told them everything before this discussion. Emily, though surprised, said, "I love you so much, and I want you to be happy. Are you thinking of quitting the company? If it's hard for you, I understand, but I will support you in any way I can. Please think about it." Robert then added, "Our son is useless. Your work is essential for our company." As it turned out, his restless in-laws arrived a little earlier than the designated time. Robert told my ex-husband, "I've had enough of you. You don't work properly. To top it off, you take leave to have affairs. Pathetic." My ex-husband retorted, "Even if you say that, I'm the only child and the next president. By my time, everything will be AI, so learning now is pointless." Emily also scolded him. "You don't work but talk big. You don't need to show your face for a while. Reflect on your actions and then come back." My sister gleefully added, "Lucky. Official vacation. Let's go on a honeymoon." It was clear the situation wouldn't get any better. I decided to stay at in-laws' house until I could find a place to live. The next day, I filed for divorce. And just like that, I became a single again. And this is where my plan got set in motion. I sent a legal letter to my sister's affair partner right after filing for divorce. My sister, panicked over the alimony demands from the wives of 7 men she had affairs with, pleaded with my ex-husband, saying, "We can get married if you pay this alimony. You're going to be the next president, so why don't you take some money from the company?" But he didn't work, so there was no way he had any money. And he couldn't possibly take money from the company. He was rational about this and furious that she had been involved with 7 other men besides him. All he had in front of him were alimony demands for a vast sum from the affair partners. His future was looking bleak. Apparently, they had a fight. But that wasn't the end of his misfortunes. A few days after I reported the divorce and my sister's affair to my dad, I was dining with my dad, who was concerned about my health. When I casually mentioned my ex-husband's parents' company, my dad said, "The president of that client company is my old buddy. Small world. We still go out for drinks regularly. He was the first person I consulted when I got divorced. He even performed at my wedding as a friend when I married your mom." It turned out that he had a relationship with the president of the client company. My dad, who was furious about this whole situation, had talked to his old friend about the divorce. He was furious that my ex-husband was so irresponsible. Knowing this, my dad contacted his old friend. He was drinking nearby, so he arrived soon. He was the president, who I had met several times at work. Small world, isn't it? I can't forgive that guy who hurt your beloved daughter. I'm going to take action immediately. Don't worry, I won't let anyone but him be unhappy. He ended this topic quickly and began to tell stories about his childhood with my dad. The next day, when I went to work, Robert looked a bit panicked. The client company said that they cannot trade with a company where my son will be the next president. Following that, related companies have also proposed to stop trading. He said. Emily also said, well, it's natural to hear such a divorce story. Trust is the most important thing for a company like ours. When I tried to contact the client company, Emily said, it's okay. It's not your fault at all. It's karma. It's about time that lazy son got a reality check. It's natural for a company to want to get rid of him. We've spoiled him too much. He's always skipping work without permission, slacking off when he's there, and then he has the audacity to suggest that manual tasks could be done by AI. He's not welcome in our company anymore. If we left the company to him, it would go under. Hearing this, Robert also said, you're right. The company would just go under if he took over. I have a proposal. It's a bit sooner than planned, but Emily, can we tell her about that thing? When he asked Emily, she said, this is the perfect timing. Go ahead, darling. Then Robert said, this is something we've discussed before the divorce, but my foolish son is good for nothing. He's a burden to the company. Therefore, I'd like you to learn various aspects of the job over the years as a potential future president. This is not about blood relations, but a proposal to protect our precious company. I hope you will accept it. I was taken aback. I didn't have confidence in myself, but I dearly love them, Robert and Emily. I want to help them. Without hesitation, I answered. I will do everything I can. I want to be of help to you, Robert and Emily. Please allow me to continue working in this company. I wish to be able to protect this company over the years. I'm at your service. The two of them were overjoyed. Even though our form as a family has ended, I'm happy to have a deep relationship with them. Upon our decision, Robert called in my ex-husband. Feeling the unusual atmosphere, my ex-husband appeared promptly. I explained the circumstances. My ex-husband, who had been smugly assuming he'd be the next president. When he found out that I had inherited the position of the next president, he started yelling at me. Playing the victim, huh? A plain Jane like you needs to have a decent personality to survive. Trying to usurp my company. I've got no intention of stepping down, he said. Before I could retort, his father, Robert, cut in. What kind of language is that for a future president? You're nothing more than a ghost employee who barely works. We no longer need such an employee in our company. You're fired. What's that all about? I'd pass on this sinking ship of a company that's on the verge of going under. I'm quitting. Give me a severance pay of $100,000. He was talking nonsense. It felt like talking to an out-of-touch child. His mother, Emily, was laughing. There's no way we have severance pay to give to you. If you say so, we'll have you compensate for all the losses the company has incurred due to your mistakes. You can't do that, can you? If so, you should quietly step back. He puffed up with an annoyed look on his face and blurted out. Geez, leave me alone. I ain't dealing with you folks no more. Don't come crying to me in your old age, 'cause I'll kick you to the curb. It was hard to believe that he would say something like this to his parents. Robert chuckled. Ha! No matter how hard times get, I ain't gonna come crying to you. Sorry, but this here company is doing way better than you think. Ain't never crossed my mind to rely on you for my retirement. And with that, my ex-husband said, "We're done here," and stormed out. We all looked at each other and couldn't stop laughing. Emily chimed in. Good riddance. Knowing him, he'll be back crying in no time. But I ain't lifting a finger to help him, no siree. It ain't doing him any good. Robert added. That's right. Well, gotta thank him for finding us a darn good successor to take over the business, at least. My ex-husband said it's a peaceful divorce, and I reckon he's right. Later, I heard through the grapevine that he broke up with my sister. They must have come to their senses after seeing that big alimony. I once spotted him working as a cashier at the nearby gas station. I was relieved to see him working hard, but that was the only time I saw him there. He probably couldn't stick with it and quit. As for me, I'm working my tail off in sales alongside the president. I absolutely adore Robert and Emily, who treat me like their own daughter. The company is bustling, with more clients and new hires coming on board. I'm having a ball at work, can't help it. My love life is in the pits, but my social life is through the roof. A fantastic family in Emily and Robert, and a job I love. Life's just peachy right now. No more ties with my good-for-nothing sister, so no troubles whatsoever. I'm grateful for the connection my ex-husband gave me.